What does the occlusion time, how does that relate to long centric? Is that, do you think that's 1 to 2 millimeters in excursion? Does that equate to the same thing? 25 cents?
Yeah, there's, as I go through this, I realize there's more to the story. In a fat graft patient, we violate all these rules. So fat graft patient, we don't have posterior disclusion time. We keep posterior occlusion. But I think there's another layer in here. I think it's teeth plus joint. Okay? And especially with subtractive dentistry, you're going to spend more time off the disc. So what if the real concept is not the amount of time that you spend on the back teeth? The real concept is the amount of time you spend off the disc, right?
Yeah.
Because every excursive movement, you're getting in that change in the TMJ. So always think a deeper layer. Is there another layer that would explain what's going on? And that may be the key.
That, I think, is what MAGD is all about, but I can't measure all that in the disc. I mean, the timing and all this, I think you're 100% right. And that's just me theoretically kind of working it up in my mind over the years. I think it's not just the timing off the back teeth and that neurology front and back circuit. I think it's also, like Mark's saying, how much time am I on the disc and off the disc? What part? And what part? Maybe lateral and medial makes a difference, not just from the stability standpoint. Maybe there's innervation there. Maybe that makes a difference too. Because if you think about the excursive movements, if we're at 3A, they're torn lateral pole, right? Let's say it's just an anterior tear. So you're on retrodiscals in MIP. And what happens when you're swinging out into the excursive movement?
You're going to the lateral pole. You're going back off the disc in a 3B.
So you're on retrodiscal.
But in a 3A, won't you click at some point and then recapture your disc?
That's why I said 3B.
In a posture.
Okay, 3B in excursion, you're on the lateral pole.
3B, you're not going to be on the disc. You're off lateral pole and you're on retrodiscal tissue there. So the 3B person is a good test.
Yeah.
If you expand this concept further, by starting from MIP or thereabouts as opposed to fully seated, if you're adjusting to fully seated, they theoretically may be spending more time off the disc until they finally move far enough forward to get under it. Whereas if he's adjusting to MIP and they're functioning from MIP, there will be less time off the disc. And if we're a little bit forward of MIP, which we do with some of these increasing vertical and all that, we may have no time off the disc from that bite relationship.
Yeah. I think it's all
assuming it's a Piper 4 or 5, correct?
Yeah, well, assuming it's like a 4A.
Right.
Assuming a Piper 4A.
Anything above that.
Yeah. The question is, and you gave the example in either earlier this year or last year, I forget, the German girl who was doing her own additive onlays.
Right.
But she said she would slip back at nighttime.
Correct.
So the patient, even though you build the bite anterior under the disc, they can still slide back.
Had that case Tuesday, okay? Different patients, same idea. I went through all the treatment options. I said, I can repair your disc. The best thing from the joint would be to take the disc out and put fat in. Then there's nothing in the occlusion. But she wanted to work on the bite, and it was the same thing. You're going to slip back at night. So after you finish the daytime work, you can make an orthodontic position or retainer. And they wear that for sleep.
At night, so you hold them at nighttime.
Right.
Measuring anterior guidance development. It's an occlusal adjustment procedure. We're tapping into the neurology behind the timing of anterior guidance. So I believe that the way we're wired neurologically, I know, because I've seen it repeatedly about 1,000 times, the timing between how teeth interdigitate top to bottom in the excursive movements primarily are a major factor as to what influences the muscles of mastication. Out of MIP, I'm not treating on a fully seated, ever. Minuscule excursive adjustments, subtractive on the posterior, additive on the anterior, and or orthodontic. Over the years, I become less and less subtractive. And even back in the day when I was following Kirstein's way, I was barely touching these little inclines. rob a little bit from Peter to pay Paul. But here's the key, you know, because nobody wants to touch that beautiful enamel, right? Everyone's arguing, oh, you never do that. Well, I'm adapting to teach the status of their stable and adapted joints. And actually, you want to know what the vast majority of the time, if they have good, stable, objectively confirmed joints, what the problem is? The restorative dentistry that guys like us did on them. That's what the problem is. Because it's not measured. Because we're using bite ribbon in general. And we're not measuring these things. It's inaccurate. It's analog. And it's travesty. This is 2017. And I'm not pushing T-scan. Consideration is given to the joint structure as well as the teeth, MAGD. So, I've already said this. MAGD biomechanically and physiologically adapts the appropriate patient's static and dynamic occlusion to the status of their objectively confirmed, relatively stable and adapted joints in a measured and objective manner. Why is it important? Because if I control that and I have good hinges, I can shut down the muscular hyperfunction. And if that's their only layer causing their pain, guess what goes away? And guess whose cold sensitivity goes away simultaneously as well? What we dentists, we call it hypersensitivity. I now call it tooth allodynia. Unlike ICAGD, MAGD, I will emphasize, also considers the joint status, objectively. A tool. So when people fly in to see me, there's a rule. When I first see them, I don't care if they're next door or across the world. The first visit, we do a comp exam. Hygienist sees them, comp exam. There's all sorts of things they miss in the dental world. I want to rule out odontogenic problems, right? The obvious stuff. And we'll have an eye swish. We'll get a bite for the MRI. I'll walk in, I'll do a dental exam, and I'll say specifically, I don't even want to know why you're here. I literally don't let them dump the box of splints on the table, talk about all the reports. I literally shut them down. And how I've trained them, most of them know it before they even come. In the videos, I display that. I demonstrate that. I show them what it is that we do when we screen. So, guess what? Less of my time wasted. And these people have seen enough of my stuff. Some of these people, I have 361 videos uploaded. Probably 250 are public. Some of them are for the CNO for my teaching. And 132 case studies. 132 times I've sat in front of Final Cut and spliced together videos to demonstrate. So it's not quite research, but it kind of is, because it's the real thing. So MAGD is important because it's a layer, basically. So what am I doing? I'm adapting the most adaptable part of the three-legged table to the status of the joints in space and time. Start thinking proprioception, touch, timing. In the excursions, out of MIP, in patients with relatively stable and adapted joints. How do I predict efficacy? The obvious, the imaging. I have to have a T-scan. It's recordable, reproducible, objective. You know, there's all sorts of people that argue, oh, there's a thickness of the sensor, there's this, that, and the other, and yet it's laughable. Here they are using ink ribbon. And the reading, I mean, literally, it's inaccurate. If you look in the research, by the way, force and time, as I mentioned in the video, slave to concurrent muscular hyperactivity and or lack thereof. How do we time it? We can't use ribbon. We can't use it. You guys can't you can't walk into your hygiene on Monday if you're using bite ribbon and knock out their cold sensitivity, I promise you. You can't do it. In the literature, how accurate is bite ribbon relative to timing and force? That much. Pick your paper. Why are we using ribbon? It's subjective. Reading tea leaves. In 2017, analog versus digital. I pray someone else comes out with something. I want Serona to come out with something. Reduce the posterior excursive contacts. This makes the muscles more efficient. This flexes the teeth less. Or maybe the proprioceptive inputs, right? The sympathetic tone, something that I'm not sure I understand is going on here. Now here's the key, and I mentioned it earlier, the iatrogenics. The things that we're dropping in based on ribbon. Those people that have a 3 or a better, it's typically because of the iatrogenics. I've done about 1,000 people over the years. So, and what's the big, these labs aren't going to like this. But what's a big one? Like Mark mentioned, he's looking for, over the years, like risk factors for, was it CRPS and familial hypertension, right? Well, in my world, zirconia. So dental medicine can't figure out how to control muscle because muscle breaks teeth, so the industry gives us something that they can't break. So guess what? You've got a machine part that frickin' won't adapt, and that's when the patient has a problem. I'm not kidding, guys. Of the 1,000 or so people, right? Who uses Cerakote here? Okay. Emax, Vita, Empress, what are we using?
Emax.
Okay, me too in the posterior, but not because of strength, because of I can cut less away and be less invasive. So I kind of am doing the strength thing, but my point is, on some patients, I'll use the feldspathic, the Vitas, because I want it to wear. Depends what's going on, right? In patients with objectively confirmed stable and adaptive joints, the interactions between opposing teeth in time directly influences a major neurological mechanism influencing the muscles of mastication. You add or subtract, depends upon the teeth and the bilateral joint condition. Subtraction, what am I subtracting on? I iatrogenically introduced zirconia, or the orthodontic movements that happen without benefit of measurement. The way I understand it, 1/3 of orthodontic patients that show up to orthodontic practices have anterior open bites. Is that fair to the orthodontists in the audience? Is that about right? How many of those patients are getting imaged per MR? Or at least getting their bites looked at, reading the bite? Not many, if any, right? Very, very few. Salvador is on my CNO board because Salvador uses the T-scan TMJ. He's starting to learn this joint-based stuff. Salvador is about a 35-year-old guy, the Latin American lecturer. Bonding canines. Why am I bonding a canine? Because the canine, for some reason, now it's all over the literature. If you think back to like what the NTI principles are, if you're on your front but not your back, it shuts down the muscles. You know, we've all heard about it, the Jenkinson stuff, the LVI people, the neuromuscular GNM, whatever you want to call these people. Those are just labels. The reality is, I deal with the human body and the patients teach me. And basically, if they're on this stuff too long in the excursive movements, that's a problem. If they get off of this stuff onto that stuff rapidly, that's a good thing. And I'd rather not have implants, especially on a canine. That's a big pearl, by the way.